Hello, everybody. All right, so you haven't been to one of these panels before. We're going to have a lot of good information that we're going to be presenting, topics we're going to talk about. So I really want to make sure everybody's wide awake and listening. So we're going to start over again, and the response is, hello, Marty. Hello, everybody.
Hello, Marty.
There we go. Thank you very much. We're going to get started. We've got a great panel here. This is the future of film, global disruption, rewards and challenges, formats, streamers, esports, and new tech. Try to repeat that. Try to memorize that. Want to welcome everybody that's here today. We've got a great group of people on the panel representing a wide range of companies at various points on the value chain, all related to movies and cinema. People that are transforming it in various ways from the norm of many years ago to what the business is going to be like in the future, and on top of that, analyzing the business and the industry. I'm going to ask each person on the panel to take a moment to give us a quick overview of who they are, what they do, and what their involvement is as it relates to this panel. I'm going to start to my immediate left with Heather Blair.
Hi, I'm Heather Blair. I'm with Extended Cinema. We are a technology company known as Experience Designers, and I am actually bringing them into cinema. Their experience has been in theme parks, and it's a role that I've played before, so I'm going to go and see if I can tee up and do it again. So I'm going to be looking to find interactive solutions for lobby, for pre-show, and for multi-sensory theaters.
Okay, and to her left, Paul Dergarbedian.
Yes,
ComScore.
I'm Paul Dergarbedian. I'm Senior Media Analyst for ComScore. I've been tracking and analyzing box office for 26 years now. God, I feel old. And I love the movie industry. What we do at ComScore is we are a point of sale. We get all the data from theaters around the world. We are the global provider of box office. We work with our exhibitor partners and studio partners to get the word out about movies, what are the trends, the box office, and beyond. We also do demographic studies of the moviegoer as they leave the theater in real time, and we also look at marketing campaigns a year before release, all the way up to the release of the movie. So we're basically covering movies from start to finish, and really and beyond, onto the small screen as well.
And to his left, Chris Fenton.
Yeah, I'm Chris Fenton. I spent 17 years navigating the U.S.-China relationship on the entertainment and media front. Made a lot of movies, both local language and films that weren't very geared to China, and then some great collaborations between the two. I took some time off in April to focus as a trustee for the U.S.-Asia Institute on the bilateral relationship, or what's sort of left of it, between China and the U.S. It's been a little frustrating over the last 5 months, but I have a lot of hope and faith that we're going to get this resolved, and probably touch on a couple of those items during this panel.
Okay, and to his left, Bob Lenahan.
Hi, as Marty said, I'm Bob Lenahan. I'm a 42-year exhibition industry veteran, the last 9 of which have been at AMC as the president of U.S. programming. AMC is the largest exhibition company in the world, so I just oversee the programming of the content in the U.S. and manage the studio relationships, and that's pretty much it.
And John Ruby.
Hi, I'm John Ruby. I'm previously with AEG Live and Fathom Events. I'm a producer, actually a recovering producer at heart, specializing in live, particularly cinemas and multiple platforms and global distribution.
And last but not least, on the far left, Ted Shilowitz.
Hi, I'm Ted. I work in the industry of pretend and fantasy. I work for a movie studio, Paramount, and I have a pretend job in a pretend industry. I'm the futurist at the movie studio, so I just get to explore new things, new ideas, and new ways of thinking, and try and bring them into reality.
Thank you, and my name is Marty Schindler. We have a husband and wife consulting team called the Schindler Perspective. Our combined credentials include a Big Four professional service firm, top 5 business school, hands-on experience at companies such as 20th Century Fox, MGM, Lucasfilms, Industrial Light and Magic, Kodak, Cinesite, and Bank of America. Through the years, we've worked at almost every point on the horizontal value chain, related to entertainment and entertainment technology, and most of the verticals that intersect with that. You can follow me on Twitter at Marty Schindler, one word. So we're going to start out with a quick poll so we get a sense of who's in the audience. Just quick raising of hands. How many people have been to the cinema in the last month? Okay. How many people work here above or below the line, our crew people? Okay, hands-on production people. How many people have seen a movie in IMAX? In 3D? Studio management? Couple people, okay. Wrote on a motion-based presentation in a theater or a theme park? All right. Attended a special event, i.e. alternative cinema at a theater that was not a current feature film? For example, the Met Opera or a classic old movie or concert? Good portion of the audience. Own a VR or AR headset other than cardboard, and you don't work for a company that uses that as part of its business. Few people, that's very good. Okay. Oh, last one, Netflix subscription. Yeah, well, that's not surprising. All right, so we had a couple of people up here already say how long they've been in the business and what they've been doing. When I started in the business many years ago, among my responsibilities at a major studio was overseeing the department that tracked domestic box office. For the Monday morning report, and it was Monday, not Friday night or Saturday afternoon, it was Monday morning, the various offices received phone calls from the depots around the country, and they put it down on a piece of paper and accumulated it, and then a new technology came out called fax. That's how far back it goes, and a couple of people are shaking their heads because Bob's remembering that as he hears that. So today, that's almost instantaneous, and we're almost at a point where international is instantaneous. International used to come in weeks later at various times. So that's brought up a one-upsmanship among the studios that are releasing films. As you look at best box office in October, you know, best this, that, or the other thing. How has that one-upsmanship and the amount of data that we get and the instantaneity of the data affected the industry, and how is it going to affect it in the future?
Well, I think that instantaneous delivery of the information allows studios to market or use the box office in particular as a marketing tool. Sunday morning, I mean, that's when the numbers go out early. That's probably my most intense deadline, because everybody wants to know what the movie is doing before the weekend's even over. There are even some outlets that put out a top 10 on Friday, already predicting the entire weekend. We don't do that. I mean, it's fine if others do it, but I think that it is definitely it's a numbers game, but it's also about the, like you said, the instantaneousness, if that's a word.
Instantaneity.
Instantaneity of
I'm not sure it's a real word, by the way.
Well, it works here. It works for me, and that's a big part of it. And I think it's about getting those numbers out there very quickly. The good thing about that is, if a movie's really doing well, it's great, because then you can tout that, you get people excited, the average moviegoer will see that, and with social media, all those numbers go out very quickly amongst just the fans and the average moviegoer. The downside is, if a movie isn't doing particularly well, let's say on a Friday, and the movie's getting beat up on, that's not always fair, because it doesn't mean that the movie is bad as a movie just because it's not making money. I get a lot of people coming up to me and they'll say, who are not in the industry, and they'll say, I'll mention the title of a movie and they'll say, oh, that wasn't a good movie. I'm like, that was a well-reviewed movie, it's a great movie, but what all they saw is the number. And if the number was thought to be disappointing, it can kind of cloud the movie's future at the box office.
Anybody else want to opine on that? Bob, how does that impact at AMC theaters?
Well, we have the luxury of looking at advanced sales to anticipate what movies are going to do, and it's usually even a stronger barometer of how well a film will do than tracking, which is something that we all rely on. We look at how movies are tracking several weeks out and compare them to other movies. As we've been discussing here in the panel, we're excited that this this weekend, Halloween, could actually gross $100 million over the weekend. So I don't want to be too disappointed if it's 99 million, but so we were constantly looking at the analysis of what the films are going to do, and we do all our financial reporting based on that actually several years out. So.
And by the way, I don't know about other international markets, but China actually has applications that people have on their cell phones that can tell instantaneously what the box office is for every movie. It actually tracks how many dollars or RMB are going into each film, I think on an every minute basis, something like that. So it's part of the reason why you saw some movie studios actually buying their own tickets to try to spike those up to create buzz around their own films.
They want to make sure they're getting their fair share back to the studio, is what you're saying there.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
That could
Simple
possibly
answer
be
is
a
yes, he
reason.
says.
Well, what you're talking about is it's interesting from a generational standpoint. The way we look at it is the burn fuse cycle is much shorter now than it was a half generation ago, another half generation ago, where you have no sort of groundswell effect anymore, where you used to have with movies that started to get good buzz, and the real sort of people that tracked really good cinema would pay attention and draw an audience slowly that would build a groundswell. Now you have an instantaneous fuse on, is it something I need to see or is it not? And it happens essentially the opening night of a movie. So you kind of lose the pedigree moment of actually this movie is really good, but it requires a while for people to realize how good it is. That doesn't actually exist anymore, at least not for theatrical cinema.
Well, but if you also look at the platform release strategy,
Yeah.
and in particular, that's where one size did not necessarily fit all. But I've found in my career that if you pay more attention to the per screen average, and how is the per screen average in particular holding up, and they used to have they'd actually send people out to key theaters and see what the audience was talking about, on the way out. Now they just monitor social media. But between per screen average and monitoring social media, you could find that even with a relatively, what would you say, less than expected opening week or two, that over the life of the film, if you can hold the screens, and I think that's where you also see certain titles coming out with a smaller footprint than the wide ones, like Bob just mentioned with 100 million for Halloween. Well, that's clearly a monster. But there's a whole lot of titles that don't necessarily fit in there. And in particular, AMC does a great job between AMC corporate and AMC independent. You guys do an awesome job of understanding the gravitas of the film and the best way to reach that audience over time.
So we were commenting, the word review came up a couple of times. They've always been a staple of movie-going, TV watching, Broadway, even going back to ancient Greek theater, the ancient Romans, Shakespeare. They all had reviewers that were out there. Social media today, as you just mentioned, has changed a lot, as has Rotten Tomatoes, all of which can sink or increase the attendance. And I got thinking about that the other day. When you look at Venom's low Rotten Tomatoes rating was about 31%, and that turned out to be nearly meaningless when it did $80 million domestic, 125 international on opening weekend. First Man had a high Rotten Tomato rating but did not do as well at the box office. So what does that really mean to the average consumer? What does it mean to the theater, the exhibitor, and what does it mean to the studios on high or low in terms of box office, high or low on Rotten Tomatoes and the like?
Well, we'd obviously like every movie to be well reviewed and have the critics say you got to go run out and see whatever the film is, but people are going to make up their own minds about what taste they have and what expectations they have for the movie that they're going to come out and see. Sometimes people are confused by marketing, and First Man is an example of a movie that was kind of marketed as a kind of a jokey action movie, which it wasn't. and isn't. I mean, it's a fine film, but it's not those things. So I think people coming in to see that movie may have expected to see something else and then ended up being disappointed. A few months ago, there's a movie called Simple Favor, which was got mediocre reviews, but I think, again, the audience was expecting to see like a romantic comedy of sorts, and it's like a Hitchcockian romantic comedy. It's actually quite a good film, but again, I think people were expecting to see something different than what was delivered on screen.
And I like how audiences followed that film beyond the opening weekend. And as audiences discovered it, I mean, that's still, I believe it was in the top 10 this weekend. It's been out for a month, and people are championing that film. And oftentimes there are movies that are really good. They get lost in the shuffle of a couple of other big movies. So like if you have Venom and A Star is Born opening, other movies that are really good can get lost in the shuffle, or it's hard to rise above the noise of those much bigger pictures. But great movies like The Greatest Showman opened amidst the opening of the last Star Wars movie last year at the end of the year. And then all of a sudden what happens? Greatest Showman just started coming from behind, slow and steady, and did incredible business, and Jumanji as well, just kept going and going. So, you know, a lot of the emphasis is on looking at that opening weekend and then saying, oh, well, if the movie doesn't open, you're in real trouble. But I think if movies are really good, hopefully people will discover them. And again, that's the upside and the downside of social media. Social media can be your greatest friend or your biggest enemy. It just depends on what the sentiment is for that movie. But with Venom, terrible reviews, but that movie's almost $400 million worldwide because it's a big brand. It's like, how can you know, it's one of those, it's too big to fail almost, but of course, as Bob said, you want to have every movie well-reviewed and do well at the box office, or on a per-theater basis for some of the smaller indie films that then get platformed out.
And marketing is really a key, too, and I just want to call out Blair Rich and her team at Warner Brothers for the amazing job she's done and her team has done marketing such diverse titles and getting them to unbelievable box office levels, like The Meg, the shark movie that they found the right way to get people to come out, shocked us with how much business that did. Crazy Rich Asians, a movie that kind of pressed diversity in a romantic comedy. First time it was an Asian cast since Joy Luck Club, like almost 30 years ago. The Nun, which was kind of a no-brainer, but still did tremendous business. And of course, A Star is Born, which, you know, is just an amazing movie, incredible directorial debut by Bradley Cooper, not to mention performance by him, Lady Gaga, and Andrew Dice Clay. You know, so kind of an amazing run Warner Brothers is on.
And I want to speak to both of those stories about A Simple Favor and about A Star is Born versus Venom. Lady Gaga's Little Monsters, trying to compete with Venom, went and did on a campaign to sour the movie, and they did a lot of negative reviews to try to bring the audience appeal down, but it didn't work. And then Simple Favor I saw because I went with someone I didn't even know what I was walking in to see, so I had no clue, and I loved it so much. I saw it in Dubai. I came home and saw it again here at AMC. I loved it, and I bought suits because I thought Blake Lively was so hot.
That's great.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that's really special about movies, you know, particularly if you take the shock and the big special effects films out. What's the emotional connection between the audience and the film and the actors that's taking place up there? And is there a deep emotional connection? And as Bob says, is that coming across in the marketing? And are all those elements delivering? Because at the end of the day, I think that's what leads to long runs with big audiences.
You know, bottom line, there's a voracious appetite for content out there, whether it's, you know, movies destined for the cinema or destined for the streamers. The major studios, the major independents, and others, including Netflix, which might spend about $13 billion this year on content, are spending heavily to meet that voracious appetite for that. And with all that competition, a couple of months ago, the Justice Department said that they are looking at the consent decree, considering maybe they don't want to, there's no longer a need for that. I'm sure most people are familiar with the consent decree. It was done in 1948. It was actually a suit against Paramount Pictures, no relation to today's Paramount Pictures because of the way the industry has gone. But what would change, if anything, if the consent decree went away? Could anything change, or it'd be just the way it is today? Oh, I've stumped everybody. Bob?
Well, I need my attorney to answer that question. But we don't think there's going to be a seismic change if the consent decree does go away. I mean, the initial tenet of the Paramount consent decree, which Paramount ironically wasn't part of, at that time, studios owned their own movie theaters. So like in Westwood, it says Fox Village. It was a Fox theater. So the consent decree forbade studios from having the vertical integration of owning their own theaters, which is when independent theater owners started developing, families started getting into the exhibition business. But since that time, in the 80s, Universal bought Cineplex, Sony bought Lowe's. I was at Mann Theaters at the time when Paramount bought them, and then Warner Brothers came into the deal. So even though the consent decree was in effect, studios who had been banned from owning their own theaters bought theaters. So it kind of doesn't really make that much sense today, in my opinion.
Anybody else? All right, I'm going to move on. But speaking of the consent decree, that's all relates to business models. It did lead to a democratization of content where, the studios had everything under one roof, including owning their own camera companies, including everything they did in post-production, the whole gamut. Another way that I think maybe the business model could be changing, we'll get some input here, is kind of what MoviePass put out there for everybody to be thinking about. MoviePass got people awakened to a different way of doing it. AMC has had success with over 400,000 memberships in their Stubbs A-list. Cinemark has a major program as well for their theaters. Is this likely to change the business model for the box office going forward?
I think so.
Well, we've seen tremendous success in subscription, and Marty called out MoviePass. AMC had actually presented the studios with a model prior to MoviePass really turning the world upside down when they came out with theirs, and which was a crazy deal, literally crazy, because they've been floundering for months. People think that AMC created our A-list program in response to MoviePass, which isn't true. We thought subscription was something that needed to happen in our industry. Our CEO has had great success with subscription models in other businesses that he's been in, the airline business, ski resorts, cruise ships. So it was a natural fit for him to bring subscription to exhibition. Marty called out Cinemark. They're also doing it. We know the company that owns Regal now has a subscription model in their European theaters, so we're expecting that they're probably going to come out with one also. But people love subscription, and if you're not an A-list member, you should probably look into it because it's a really, really good deal.
And I think if you're a frequent moviegoer, it makes total sense, right? Because it means that you are on the A-list at AMC, and they offer you a lot of incentives, dynamic pricing in a way, and subscription-based pricing is something we've all become accustomed to in almost every walk of life. So I think it makes sense. I like it, though, that the theaters are in control of their own destiny. They have their own programs that they can sustain rather than relying on some, like you said, kind of a crazy business model that could be or was or is unsustainable.
Anything big in terms of announcements we can anticipate for Show East next week? From anybody, even if you can speculate about others?
I don't know of any, Marty.
Okay. All right.
I think Show East is going to be, and Show East is the movie convention every year. This year it's in Miami, and it's differentiated from CinemaCon, which is in Vegas every year. And it's where all the theater owners and studios get together, talk about upcoming product, and meaning movies, and also in theater marketing campaigns that are being touted and coming attractions for upcoming films, I think what they're going to be talking about a lot this year is the fact that in North America and around the world, in certain territories, and in particular North America, is really booming at the box office right now. So when you have all the people from the industry together, it's obviously better to be at a point in the year where we're running 10% ahead of last year. We're going to have a record-breaking October. As Bob said, we could have a $100 million opening with Halloween. These are all that we had. The second biggest September ever. Records broken practically every month of this year. So I think it's about that optimism going forward for the industry, with understanding that there are challenges, as there are with any industry, and dealing with all those challenges. But it's all about getting together there and talking about those things and being aware of what's going on, not just in the theatrical side of the industry, but also Hollywood in general, small screen competition, and the like.
So, speaking of record box office, you know, Chris has mentioned his work in China and following that for a lot of years, but everyone in one way, shape, or form is looking at what goes on there. You know, they're currently a solid number 2 at the global box office, expecting to hit about $9 billion is what I have been reading about for this year. And I was reminded about China box office recently when Facebook reminded me of a post that I had put up in 2014, 4 years ago, and this was just a few weeks ago, 2014, citing an article that China would be #1 in just a couple of years. Well, that still hasn't happened, especially as China's economy has been slowing down a little bit. And Hollywood's share of the box office there has been, you know, level to declining. When is it likely that China will hit #1, or will it? Is it still a fait accompli that China will be #1?
Well, I'd be willing to bet that, yes, it's a fait accompli, that they will hit #1. It's just a question of when. I mean, they just have a massive population and momentum there to be able to take that lead. I think it's sort of up in the air whether the U.S. studio films are going to be the ones that really help push it over that mark, or whether they've caught up to us in a certain aspect of film execution where their local language movies are going to help them get over that hump. And then on top of it, I do think we have issues that are brewing with nationalism inside the market, where there is a predisposition to maybe not favor U.S. films at the moment until some of our positions and stances on the market and on China change. But that said, it's definitely going to get there. I mean, if you look at when we really jumped into the movie business, that was 2008, right after the Summer Olympics. They had not even 5,000 screens, and today I think they're somewhere around 55 to 60,000 screens. So they're 11x or more in 10 years. And a lot of those movies, those theaters are not full, even on weekends, because the population is still starting to come up and be able to grasp in the second and third tier cities the ability to pay for these movie tickets and to get accustomed to the habit of going to movies. But that's all going to happen.
Are they going to be overbuilt? That happened here back in the, early 90s, I think.
I mean,
You can speculate.
Yeah, I'll speculate. I've seen a lot of overbuilding in China, but if you build it, they will come. So it almost seems like, wow, who's going to live in the 6th ring row area outside of Beijing? That seems ridiculous to develop out there, and then the next time you're there a year later, it's fully populated. So my guess is we're going to see full theaters, even where it's overbuilt, in a very short amount of time.
All right. Let's move on to esports for a moment. It's a way that some of the theater auditoriums have been utilized. I saw a recent headline that esports is not a flash in the pan, and that esports is growing like wildfire. Another stated that Fortnite's get the words out. I'm going to try it one more time. Meteoric rise, that's pretty good. Meteoric rise to the top of the gaming scene has been turning heads since Epic Games announced it would allot $100 million in prize money. So it's among the many concepts that keep occupancy going, especially in the early part of the week. I saw a couple of guys from Barclay Center interviewed on TV a couple of weeks ago where they had 10,000 people paid $100 each for the experience of an esports competition. And that didn't even include the 15 million uniques that were watching online. We'd love 15 million people to go to a theater on a weekend. So is esports a flash in the pan? Does it have the sustainability to grow?
All right, I'll jump in on this one. So this is still a growing process. As they say in this trade, they're building the plane as they're flying it. The thing with cinema, Mr. Lanahan will confer, is that if it's event cinema, that means it requires people to do something other than rip a ticket and send them to lay down to Theater 7 to the left. So esports is an event, and until they kind of get a handle and the industry gets a handle on how to do the event where it can make money on a regular basis, on a consistent basis, still a little bit shy, a little bit away from that. And I think there needs to be a meeting of the minds with the producers of the content, like we did for 4D, as we went and got all the studios to agree to give content so we could make movies and turn them into 4D. Esports is going to have the publishers get on board with providing some sort of content that can be played perhaps online for a while until it culminates into a finals, and then that can be played inside the cinema. But it's still not quite there yet to where it can be something consistently done every week and drive in a group of people every week consistently.
Ted, does that sync with your view of the
Yeah,
future?
I think Heather's basically on the right track in the sense that all the sort of leading indicators that we look at feels like this is heading into the alternative sort of use case for events and event space rather than the traditional let's go to the theater model. Like Blizzard has an experimental place down in Burbank. In Vegas, they've got a big sort of eventized thing going on a regular basis for esports now. But they don't really find the right home in a traditional let's go to the movies environment. And I think it's really because the audience is different. The audience is not stimulated by that moment. They can get that experience at home that they want. And a couple of times a year, they're going to go to some big giant event, but it has to be promoted and connected correctly to that audience. And it's not just a Friday night, I want to go and check out esports. It is a once every 6 months, the big giant esports thing is happening. The giant stars of their day are coming. You gather in a big arena to see that. It's not a movie theater thing. That's why it feels like the attempts in the movie theater have always fallen short, because it just doesn't work with the psychology of the audience correctly.
Is it something that requires give it a little time, or is it
No,
likely
I just think it's not the right venue. I think alternative large stadium-oriented or newfangled stadium-like venues that you go to very occasionally as opposed to going somewhat regularly, even with the statistics on average U.S. movie going 5-6 times a year. This is more once or twice a year. This is more like you're going to go to Coachella or something like that once a year. You're going to go to a big esports tournament once or twice a year. And the rest of it you're going to watch on Twitch at home.
So that gives credence to the Barclay Center happening. But that's Manhattan. You could do something like that here at Staples or the Forum or other places. But what about second or third tier cities? That's New York and LA, but there's got to be the Clevelands, the Baltimores, the various...
They all have event spaces that they do these things at, and then they would do that at. What we're seeing is an interesting sort of trend is when it gets out of the what we call Twitch behavior for esports, which is kids doing this with a game controller or a PC and a mouse, into the actual physicality of esports for virtual reality, which is actually starting to happen now. It's becoming an underground kind of thing that's now starting to appear above ground, where people are actually using their physical bodies in esports, and you're going to start to actually get your first real sports stars in esports as opposed to Twitch teams, because it's a different sort of thing. It's much more visual and much more appealing to an audience. So you might actually see the evolution of kind of the Madden experience, where you actually have people really playing a digital game with their physical bodies and using the skills of their hand-eye coordination rather than the hand-eye coordination of this. That seems to be something that we're keeping an eye on.
Ted, I'm curious, are you seeing, what about on amateur side where it's full participation like Super League Gaming?
Yeah.
Are you feeling like that's something that's habit forming at
It
all?
absolutely is habit forming. We're seeing it in traditional gaming, and we're, with these multiplayer games that kids will play. Fortnite is probably the biggest example of that, right? And we're also seeing it in the emerging style of VR. The most popular single title in VR is an indie game called Beat Saber, which is basically just a chopping blocks to music game. It's very, very simple, but it's extremely viral, and they're already waving into this competitive Beat Saber stuff in these location-based entertainment environments, and where people will actually watch other people play it because they're so damn good at it. And you can actually see in their physical body how good they are, just like watching a pro golfer, pro tennis player, pro football player.
How do you see the demographics?
It's fairly youth-oriented. It still skews male, but more females are getting involved in it. But it's the same demographic as traditional video games right now.
So, Fortnite was a phenomenon by any measurement. Is that going to prompt a lot of other game companies to try to replicate that? And like movies or TV shows, if the answer is yes to that, which I presume it is that going to cause some of will there be some failures along the way too?
Yeah, well, if you really kind of do a little bit of analysis on the success of Fortnite, Fortnite is not the first game to do a Battle Royale game successfully. There have been many predecessors that have done Battle Royale style games. And there was another game that's also a multi-billion-dollar success called PUBG, which is a little more adult version of Fortnite, that basically has the exact same game mechanics and the same goal set as Fortnite. And what Fortnite figured out was how to make it a little safer, make it a little more supposedly kid-friendly, so the parents would be like, you're definitely not playing PUBG because this is like hardcore violence, but fine, you can play Fortnite. It's like cartoon violence, but it's really the same thing because there's guns and stuff. And now they're learning how to continue to remigrate on the phenomenon. So what they've done with Fortnite, the latest sort of wave of Fortnite, is you can dance your way to success. You don't actually have to kill anybody or use a gun. You just do this floss dancing, and if you're really good at it, you can be the last man standing, which is a whole nother thing. And then there's a kind of a Minecraft part of Fortnite that is not even discussed all that much, but another big part of why it's so damn successful is not just the shoot 'em up stuff, it's the world creation and building of Fortnite that kids really like, and some kids just dig that. So what they've really discovered and figured out is it's not a one-size-fits-all gaming universe. If you put 4 or 5 game styles that a lot of people will like to play, you will get a female audience, you'll get an older audience, you'll get a younger audience, you'll get kids that aren't as good at shoot-'em-up games, and suddenly you have this massive profit monster on your hands, and that's what they've done.
By the way, just really quick on the gender gap that he mentioned, I read something this morning, and it goes back to the power of film and the emotional attachment that people have to movies. But for the first time in history, Fender sold more than 50% of their guitars in the last couple of weeks to women, and it's all attributed to Star is Born. So maybe Hollywood needs to create a Star is Born starring Ninja and
video game.
Some female.
Well, and to your point about commercialization of the video gamer, if you will, there's a commercial out, and I can't remember the brand, but I definitely remember that there's a young girl, and her big reveal moment is she's part of the big gaming team walking into the big arena, and they're not going to use that unless that they see it as a major product. I think that exactly what we're talking about right now. I was at the immersive think tank right before this, and that's exactly what everybody was talking about, the location-based entertainment and facilities that are designed for it. And the music games that you're describing, I could see clubs picking that
It's
up
already
and
happening.
having, so there you go.
Plus on the mobile side, it's the reverse equation. On the mobile, what we call light touch gaming, it's much more female driven than male driven. So it is not a one-size-fits-all world, and there are definitely areas in the gaming world where women are absolutely 100% leading the charge, both in creation and playing.
It also seems to me like this might be a great opportunity, and maybe it's already being done, where we always think of the younger audience as being tougher to get to come out to the movie theater to see a movie. And if they're doing all this, if there's so much interest in gaming, you know, to market to that group or offer them incentives to come out to a movie, because they're already not necessarily in a theater, if they may be, and then how do you get them to come back for that experience as well? It's more of a rhetorical question, but it just seems like that younger viewer that seems to love being in front of their small screen device or watching video or playing video games at home or whatever, if they're going outside of the home to play video games, maybe you can keep them out there and go see a movie. I don't know. There may be something there.
Yeah, well, we know behavior's habitual, right?
Yeah.
So if you get someone to see like 3 movies, they're going to see another 3 movies. If you get them to play 3 mobile games, they're going to play another 3 mobile games. It's just a matter of where their draw point is, and it's just a matter of getting them into 3 things that they go, those are really good. And they're like, I want to do more of that. Right. It's just hard to get them out of their cocoon, their digital cocoon and their home cocoon these days, because the draws of the technology are so strong that they literally just don't have any more time to do out-of-the-house entertainment.
Right, and you can't market to them overtly in a non-organic or contrived way, because they'll smell that a mile away. Mm-hmm. And they'll be like, oh, you're just trying to, you see that I'm here doing this, you're just trying to market to me to get you to go do something else. But there's got to be a way with thought leaders in that industry or others being involved on the movie side of the business, because I'm always thinking about the movie part of this. I'm not as much on the gaming side, although it's incredibly important. But all these audiences are not mutually, or these, you know, gaming is not, does not exclude going to the movies. Small screen does not exclude big screen. I look at them all as complementary and additive. And as people are, you know, and younger people and older people are using all these technologies, different platforms, movie theaters to get their entertainment. And a great example is what you just said about the Fender guitars selling now more to women since Lady Gaga's in the movie playing the guitar. That's a very natural way, and I'm sure they didn't plan that at all. That was just an organic thing within the movie that happened. Movies are so impressive. They impress upon people. They're so, you know, they can make people change their behavior, change their point of view, also make them buy guitars and all that other stuff. So there's just a lot of influence there.
Was Fender part of product placement in A Star Is Born? I saw the movie, but that didn't ring a bell with me. And I don't play guitars, other than air guitars sometimes, but...
I think there were a lot of different guitars.
Yeah, I don't think there was.
But
No?
I think Gaga taught Bradley Cooper how to play the guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah, she knew how to play it before. Yeah, I mean, she's classically trained actor and musician. Not a lot that girl can't do.
So I can speak a little bit too about the audience that come in for an esports tournament. If you've ever been around an esports tournament and the group of people that come in look like they should be in a Paul Verhoeven movie, they look like they just got up for the first time and are scared to death of where they're at. And when you talk to them, they're startled, like, oh, hi. So they're really so focused on the game and what they're doing. To me, to really make it a success for the crossover, it would have to be good old-fashioned theater management or theater staff walking up and shaking their hand saying, come back. That would work.
And by the way, I don't want to get into rainbows and unicorns about our business here, but having dealt with a lot of issues with the U.S.-China bilateral relationship, and now we're seeing issues with Saudi Arabia too, and on top of it, sort of a bifurcation or a separation of two very distinct points of view in the United States, whether red or blue, it doesn't matter. We're all part of the same country and we're all part of the same world. And I've seen the collaboration of making entertainment, particularly 2 movies that I was involved with were Looper and Iron Man 3. In fact, Iron Man 3 was such an amazing collaboration between the U.S. and China that I actually went back to Capitol Hill quite often and would present this film diplomacy, a win-win for U.S.-China relations thing quite often, and it resonated. And when you think about sports competitions and the community that sports create, the community that creating content creates, the community that movie theaters and arenas create with all kinds of people from all walks, I get super excited about what we do for a living, and I think we really need to take a lead in what we do to try to mend some fences a little bit out there and bridge some gaps that are continuing to seem to get more divided. So there's my, I guess,
Well taken.
altruistic speech, right?
We're a few minutes off from Q&A, and you can be first. We're not
Marty,
there yet.
Just
John?
one follow-on point to, we were talking about aggregating a group to go to see a film as an experience, and I think that's something you don't hear a lot about, but I think that the industry has done an extraordinary job, whether it's Atom or Fandango or the exhibitors themselves in their own apps. They make it very easy for you to invite your friends, and in particular when you're marketing to millennials and below, it also hits them with a very soft fear of missing out, which is a big motivator within that group. And so I think that in particular, that's a very intelligent use of technology to increase, the number of people that are coming out, particularly to experience filmed content together.
Yeah. Matt from Atom Films referred to me by Bob a couple of years ago. He's been on this panel a couple of times in the past, and it's a really smart product.
Yeah, they're extraordinary.
So Paul mentioned both, it doesn't matter what size screen, so let's chat IMAX for a moment. And I was thinking about it just the other day in the terms of Greg Foster announcing that he was leaving. Greg has been on a couple of the 3D panels I've done in the past. Phil Groves, as head of distribution, has been on this panel previously, and his successor, Craig Damel, has also been a part of it, friends with several of you guys, and Craig actually referred me to Chris and said, I can't be there, but you need to go to Chris, and I'm glad he did. But I got thinking about IMAX. Back in the year 2000, my wife and I were retained to do a study for the Giant Screen Theater Association. It's a slightly different name today. They were really upset by the fact that IMAX had announced moving into commercial movies. These are the folks who run the museums, the science centers, the institutional theaters. So we were asked to study the economics and make some recommendations about where the industry was going. Our bottom line recommendation was the institutional movie with its set of economics and business model, and the commercial side of which I'd been a part of for a long time, they each would develop their own businesses, and indeed they have. So as we look at it though, and actually I delivered a keynote address on that 10 days after 9/11. It had to go from here to Chicago, and I got to tell you, it was really eerie on going back and forth on an airplane during that time period. Today you can't have a movie come out of any significance without either an IMAX or let's call it PLF, premium large format presentation. Is that only going to grow? It's continued. I look at Greg as being a guy who helped really push that forward over the years. Paul shaking his head. Are you agreeing, not agreeing? Bob, I know, has got 2 cents on that one too.
If I could jump in real quick, I think with IMAX, and you're right, around that time, back in 2000, 2001, it was like, museum, nature documentaries, that kind of thing for IMAX. And now it has become, with any big title, part of that release and the prestige of a release is having the film in IMAX. And in China, there's been tremendous growth in the number of IMAX theaters. First Man is a great example of a film that's amazing in IMAX. I think Greg Foster, and he's an old friend of mine, and I think he was the one who called me one day, and this is how we met actually, because I had said something in the press saying, IMAX, they're all about museums and nature docs. And he called me one day and he said, no, we're a lot more than that. Let's go to lunch and talk about it. And then I learned, and he has championed that part of that business, along with his partners in exhibition and on the studio side. Now it's part and parcel of almost every big release. But Bob can speak to it much better.
Pardon me, Paul. So just a little history lesson. I mean, back in the summer of 2000, I happened to be at Lowe's Theaters, and we had 4 of the 5 IMAXs in the United States. Lincoln Square in New York, Navy Pier in Chicago, Universal City here, Metreon in San Francisco, and then Regal had Irvine, down in Orange County. And that summer, they didn't have any of their, fish and feather IMAX releases. So I went to the studios and asked them to change the format of their movies. The blockbusters that summer, Pearl Harbor, Planet of the Apes, some other big titles. So they adjusted the way the light would go through the film at the time, because it was pre-digital, so it would appear better on the IMAX screen. And we did like $1 million, just in those 4 screens. But IMAX was furious with us because it wasn't a pure IMAX experience, and we were sullying their brand, was what they said. And as the theater owner, it's like, I need to have people in my seats in the summertime. So then they hired Greg, who really is the DNA of IMAX feature film. I think his first project was repurposing Apollo 13, which is kind of a full cycle now, or full circle now, with First Man being, made and shot with IMAX cameras. The last few minutes, or the last 20 minutes of the movie are just amazing. And Greg's relationship with Chris Nolan, J.J. Abrams, and other filmmakers has really made a huge impact on our business. So yes on IMAX, yes on PLFs. Just a quick note, I think you're not going to get a better movie-going experience than by going to a Dolby Cinema, which AMC happens to have the only Dolby Cinemas in the U.S. But that, with the Dolby Vision, the Dolby Atmos sound, and there's like a bass element in the seats, so it's not D-Box or 40X, but it is more immersive. So I would recommend that, and they're here to stay.
I would just add, in China, the IMAX logo and brand are so powerful. There's D-Max there too, but IMAX is more the Western brand. Just having that on a movie, regardless of whether the consumer wants to see it in IMAX or not, gets them to go see the movie, because they believe that IMAX only is involved with great movies.
The challenge that IMAX had for a long time was becoming generic. I'm going to an IMAX movie, or it's similar to Kleenex, or when I worked at a Kodak company, they would not say, we're going to go Xerox this paper, we're going to photocopy it. So it became that term for a while, and I think it has probably shaken a lot of that off, but not entirely. We're running out of time, and I've got more topics, but we've got 2 things left to do. One is going to be time for a few Q&A. Q from you, A from these folks. And then I've got something I didn't mention earlier called Blockbuster. Now, I'm going to read off a whole bunch of forthcoming movies over the next several months, and ask by a show of hands if you think they're going to be a blockbuster by your definition or not. So let's go with a couple of questions. I promised that gentleman back there that he could ask first question. Go ahead.
My name is Rakesh. I'm a mixed reality developer out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I just wanted to get your opinion on something. I saw the movie Get Out out in New York at the theater in Chelsea. And it was interesting because of the neighborhood and the cost. It was a specific kind of audience. It was more middle class, white. And it was an interesting experience. And then recently, I was on the big screen ad in my Oculus Rift over in Milwaukee. And I was in an environment where I could watch a movie socially with other people from around the country. And we weren't limited by demographics. But the person who was in charge of the room couldn't load his video file for us to watch the movie. So I'm wondering if you guys have begun to think about distribution in that type of format, and perhaps if there's an ecosystem for indie developers to be involved, whether it be ticket sales or some sort of swag selling online.
So from a studio standpoint, I think we're the first studio to partner with Big Screen to put a commercial movie in their virtual theater. And it was a very worthwhile experiment. We're going to do more experiments with them. It's still an emerging, obviously, form of the art and commerce, but we're learning and we're seeing what's going to happen. We think there's still a fair amount of technological steps that need to be crossed over before it's a really dynamically satisfying experience like it is to go to a real high-resolution motion picture. But they're getting there, and they're starting to make progress. So we just see it as an area that's really interesting. They're not, by a long shot, the only ones that are doing this kind of thing. There are a number of companies. When I was with Fox, before I was at Paramount, we did some experiments with Oculus, and we were the first to announce a whole slate of movies that you could watch in mobile VR, which they're still doing today. Netflix, as an example, and Hulu both have like virtual cinema experiences or virtual living room experiences that you can just fire up and get stuff, and I believe Showtime is now doing it as well. I think HBO is coming soon. So, everybody's starting to get on the bandwagon and realize that this is going to be something. And then, there's this interesting kind of discussion on if you can create a virtual cinema, is that even one notch less of a reason to go to a real cinema? I don't think so at all. I think the actual human connection and human contact and human feeling of being in a real environment with real people is a wholly different experience than being in a virtual environment with virtual people. They're both valuable, they both can drive commerce, and I actually don't think they conflict much with each other at all. I think they will just enhance, people seeing good stuff in good ways and wanting to go to real theaters sometimes and wanting to see it in other ways other times.
Another question? Mark?
Hi, Mark from Relish Mix. Chris, in China, we're told by the studios that their frustration obviously is waiting for a release date, but we're also told that the window from yes, you're going to release is to the actual date is like 6 weeks. Is that always the case? Is that going to expand, or is that changeable? Is that what can you tell us about that?
Well, the WTO and the MPAA and Lighthizer and everybody else are supposed to be negotiating the new terms of a new pact between the U.S. and China there. Unfortunately, there's a lot of macro issues that are taking priority over that. My point of view on it is actually expanding that window is starting to get a little dangerous for U.S. studios, and the reason I say that is that the amount of and let's go back 6 years ago, a studio, if they got a movie approved to release there in China, there was very little they could actually spend to market and promote it. It was all done through China Film Group, a lot of point-of-purchase marketing and so on. Now they've opened it up so that you can actually really spend real money to open a movie there. And the average studio tends to spend somewhere between 6 to 12 to 15 million to open a film. Disney, on some of their larger releases like Star Wars, is probably over 20. If you look at the results of the box office and realize they're only getting 25% cut of that, a lot of movies aren't getting out of there with a profit, which is really unbelievable, because 6 years ago you automatically made a profit. Now you're going, geez, half of our movies aren't. So to expand on 6 weeks may get a little dicey in regards to those P&Ls. So there's a little bit of a yin and yang, not to use a pun there, but it'll be interesting to see how they do it. I think another argument that I don't necessarily agree with is expanding the film quota in China, because ultimately what that will do is cause more movies to fight over the same amount of gold. I think it's better to keep the rev share quota around where it is right now, but push a lot of the effort into the rental fee going up from 25% to say 30 or 35%, or something more normalized.
Well, that'd be the last question, because we're going to do Blockbuster or not. Go ahead, please. Yes.
This is a question for Ted and also for Mr. Lenihan. It has to do with what do you see as the economic impact of VR being exhibited in theaters over the next 5 years?
As in, like, using theater lobbies and maybe replacing some of the lower performing auditorium halls with theme parky location-based entertainment thing? I think somewhat significant, not massively significant. It's pretty clear to most of us that work in the industry that the long-term aspirations and goal sets and where this stuff is heading is a home and mobile device. And the location-based side of it is an interesting offshoot to that. That will have some degree of value, and we of course want to participate in that value, but we don't see it as the primary driver of the economics, neither short-term or long-term. Today, it's very valuable because so few people have these headsets in their homes, because you have to tether them to a computer, they're expensive, they're exotic, and that is now on the pretty significant wave of change with the next wave of the fully mobile, what we call six-DOF headsets coming to market. So this product now called Oculus Quest will be a $400 product that will deliver essentially what you had in the computer with the wires in a wireless headset form factor for a fairly low cost, and they're going to deliver a lot of interesting games and experiences to it. Still resolution challenged. It still has a lot of the friction issues of wearing this crazy box on your face, but it is the sort of professional outbound, let's take it out of the home and make it a location-based environment, will be a nice secondary or tertiary industry, but I doubt it will be the primary industry or primary economic driver for this medium.
We're going to do the blockbuster
Marty,
or not list, and then this guy is anxious, so if we get through the blockbuster before they kick us out, you're on.
But John should
Yeah.
add something.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that.
Sorry, Bob.
But that's okay.
Be my guest.
So there is a company, the VR interactive program called Dreamscape, which has partnered Steven Spielberg, Westfield, AMC's an investor. There was a beta set up at Century City. As I said, it's interactive. You can go in with your family and friends, and you can see, like John would appear as an avatar. It wouldn't look like John Ruby, but it would clearly be him. And you can, and it's, as I say, it's interactive and it's designed by Spielberg. It was called Alien Zoo, so it's really a phantasmagorical experience to do that. And it was in Century City on a trial basis for several weeks, and we sold out every show. So I think there is something there, but is it going to be a huge thing? I doubt it, but I think there is an element with that kind of
we like it. We
talent.
track it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. The following list is not in any specific order, so your own definition of blockbuster. Stan and Ollie? No one's familiar with it. Okay. Nutcracker and the Four Realms?
Yes.
And it's not a matter of
I saw
whether
it
you
today.
want
It's
to
a
go to
good
that.
movie.
Pardon me?
I saw it today. It's a
Did
good
you?
movie. Yep.
Good movie. Okay. The Grinch?
Yes.
Okay. Ralph Breaks the Internet? Handful of people. Spider-Man? The RBG movie on the basis of sex? Okay. Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald?
Of course.
The Girl in the Spider's Web? Good handful. Mary Poppins? Popular movie. Dr. Seuss? Actually, that was The Grinch. Aquaman? Bohemian Rhapsody?
Great movie. Great movie.
Okay. Bob, have you seen that?
Yep, it's great.
Okay. Diverse audience, demographics? Or old guys with white hair like I have?
Even you will like it, Marty.
Oh, all right, thank you. Mortal Engines? Yeah, I think you're like me, that's interesting. Alita Battle Angel? Not a lot there. Bumblebee? Johnny English? The Ballad of Buster Scruggs? And Mary Queen of Scots. Actually, one last one, Rocket Man. That's coming out next year. All right, he's got one question, and then we're going to adjourn. Go ahead, please.
The old model, here in LA, we used to have theaters that did second run. So you could go a month later, 2 months later. That's something we had involved. When you have multiplexes now that are challenged to fill all the rooms, they have a budget, to basically take it to a second tier. Would that make sense at this time? John, you worked the last few years on filling rooms.
Yeah, in my experience, they were generally outside the core. When we lived in Houston, we used to be able to go up 20 miles outside of town, and there were $1 movies, $2 movies and stuff. Bob could really speak better to it from a distribution perspective.
Yeah,
I'm sorry? Oh, well, I probably wasn't here then, sorry.
So you didn't have, an aggressive market for home delivery. So movies are, available in the home a lot sooner than they were in those days, if they were available at all. So between that and, the the number of screens per multiplex, as you mentioned, movies tend to hold if they're good, up until they're going to be released on DVD, and they're released through electronic sell-through even prior to that. So that's kind of made that model a dinosaur.
And the number of screens in total has changed. I know when I first started, there were 17,000 screens in North America. And now it's 39, just shy of 40,000. Join me in thanking this group for a great job today, please.